Here we go, part 2. We are going from the factory B-sticks disassembled. We're working through assembly, and our final product is going to be my final setup here. In part 1, if you didn't see that, check that out first. We stealth stripped the stick, the base stick, and then we assembled and we silenced our connectors with stealth stripping, which is where we're at here. We are going then for part 2 tonight. We're just going to work on our rope. So the B-sticks come with the webbing and the metal pull buckle. There are some stealth stripping ways to try to silence the belt buckle or the buckle from hitting anything, but it doesn't change the weight, and I just don't like messing with these things, trying to get them tight around the tree. So as you saw in mine, we're going to do an Amsteel rope mod. On these, I had just done plain old rope mod. I am now going to be switching them over to daisy chain. I did not like daisy chain at first until I saw a gentleman had done a mod on how he uses the daisy chain, and you can actually get it a whole heck of a lot tighter than you can with the rope mod even. So I'll drop that link below, but basically I took my Predator platform now and I did the daisy chain, the small loops out every once in a while. And the way he did this, if I can show you, I'll try to demonstrate on a tree or something later too, but he came around, he went under his button, and then he came back to a loop back here, fed it through, and then ripped it tight on the tree. And then brought this tag end around and looped it, and that actually brought that platform so tight to the tree, it was impressive. So it convinced me to switch over and do the daisy chain on my platform, and I will also be doing it on my sticks now. I did have a stick kick out on me when I was up in the stand, and I was bringing the bow up, the string caught a stick, just barely lifted it up enough that it kicked over. So I'd like to be able to tighten them up to the tree a whole heck of a lot tighter, and it looks like I'm going to be able to do that using the daisy chain now. So let's get into it. I've got my length of Amsteel here. I do have the 1/4 inch Amsteel Blue, and basically when you're going to daisy chain, you're just going to double over. And this is my top stick, so it doesn't need to be incredibly long. If I stretch this out, I've got about a 6-foot wingspan or so. So I'm about, let's say, 7-foot total length. So 14-foot total. And you just go ahead and get down to your middle. Right? And we're going to measure this to fit over our Versa button here. Basically, in order to work with this Amsteel, you're going to need what's called a fid and possibly a pusher. I'm going to show you some different examples of options that you have for that. So you can get, here's a 3-pack of little plastic splicing fids. You can also get this rather expensive set of splicing kit, and you're going to have numerous sizes of fids there and a real nice pusher. I'll end up using the pusher out of that set. Another option, which is significantly cheaper, and easy to find is just some fids from a knitting kit. And I've been using this one here. I believe. Okay, so let's jump on how we do this. I'm going to try to use my overhead if we can get it to work better today. We're going to end up tucking both of these ends away eventually. So you're going to want to taper them. One easy way to taper them, just pull out some of the strands. When you're working with this Amsteel, you want to have some heavy duty scissors. And make sure they're sharp. I cut a few strands off there. I'll cut a few strands off a little bit higher. Doesn't have to be pretty. That's just going to let you then make a little bit more of a taper. And to keep that intact, I roll it real tight. And there you've got one tapered end. So let me do the other end real quick. Okay, so there's my two slightly tapered ends. That'll keep them intact, and they don't have to look pretty because we're going to end up burying them in the Amsteel when we're done. So now we're back to here. We're basically getting a rough estimate of how big a loop we need to slide over this Versa button without it being able to come off real easy. You're going to find your point, and you're just going to pinch this Amsteel together to open up the hollow rope, and you're going to feed this through. And you are being careful not to split those threads, feeding the fid through the middle, trying to keep the same amount of threads on each side roughly. And if that was through there, I'm then going to take this tag end, insert it into my fid, and feed that through there. Now obviously that knot can slide around, so this is the important part on working with this Amsteel, is how to lock that in. So we're just going to look at about where we need to have it locked to where it's going to stretch to go over. That's going to be about right here. And now this tag end had fed through this end, so now we need to put this one through this one, the opposite, right? So what we're going to do is kind of mark that spot, slide this out of our way, open this up, feed our fid through there. Find our end, insert it into the fid. Again, this end had gone through this end previously, so now this end has to go through this one, the opposite. You feed that through, kind of work that knot together. And as you can see, that's not sliding, and this isn't sliding apart. And it should be a little bit of a stretch, not terrible, to get it over. And now that is not coming off, and it's locked in place. It's not going to slide open, it's not going to slide tighter to where you'll never be able to get it off. And we're on the Versa button. So then our next step is going to be doing our daisy chains. Obviously these first ones don't need to be too tight because that's not even going to wrap around anything. However, you know, some people will come all the way out this far or whatever, but then I don't like this huge gap, so I'll cut it down some, what you're going to be doing here is basically going, I go about 6 inches, let's say. You're just going to open this up, feed your fid through, take the other tag, feed that through, and pull it through. Pull this fairly tight so you see where you need to pass through. You're always going to pass through just below where you pass through on the other rope. So we just passed through this one. Now we need to pass through this one. And it's going to be just below there. We'll open that up. Feed our fid through, being careful not to separate threads. Grab our tail. There you go, you pull those tight. And if you judge your distance right, there you see it kind of lays together. It's not, this one's not extra long and this one's short like that or anything. They're about the same because you got your marks correct. I'm going to slide out and do one more big gap. Okay, now from here to the end, I'm going to start smaller gaps that are just big enough that they would fit over the Versa button if you decided to use your daisy chain that way. Otherwise, you'll see later how we're going to use this as far as the sliding the tag end through one of these daisy chain holes and pulling it tight back to the Versa button to use it that way. So there's one of our small holes. You can see how that would fit over the Versa button. It's maybe a little too big if you were looking to actually slide it over the Versa button. I might try to get a little bit smaller here. As you can see, if you slid that over and it pulled tight, it could actually come off. I'll show you here when I said don't split the threads, that's what I'm talking about. That bigger thread is made of lots and lots of tiny threads and you don't want to split them. You want to get between the big threads. So that's more the size we're looking for if you are using it in a true daisy chain style of bringing it around the tree and looping it back over the Versa button where it slides over fairly easy, but even if you pull here, that's just not going to come back off real easy. Okay, so you see how we got this started. I'm going to go ahead and work my way through toward the end and then I'll show you So we're about 6 foot to there, let's say. And we're obviously down to 2 tag ends. I'm going to show you how we're going to bury these. So we want to go from those 2 to a clean end like this, where this one's buried and then this is double back buried. Gives you a little bit of weight on the end too to whip it around the tree and just keeps it looking better, right? We're going to make our normal distance loop here. Pass this end through. And now when this end goes through, instead of passing through, we're going to go in to that other tag end. So we find our spot there. You're going to feed your fid down into the Amsteel. Kind of like that Chinese finger trap. You just get it as open and pushed together as you can. Eventually you're going to then start bringing the fid out through there. Might have gone a little short here. This might be a little challenging to feed through. Go ahead and cut that to taper a little bit more. Feed this through with the fid. I want to get as much of that tag in into the fid as possible. So now we're going to start pulling this bunched up Amsteel over the top of that fid tail. There you can see it start to go. And you can be really OCD about it and try to get it beautiful. I'm just trying to get it to do its job. It looks somewhat decent. But there you see, you pull this down tight then. It hides that tag in, but it also locks it in place. That's the purpose of that. So now that tag end is locked inside of the other tag end. And you've got a big loop on the end, I guess. Now what are we going to do with this tail? We're going to feed it back through itself to give us that additional weight on the end. To do that, we're just going to come the long side of the halfway mark. Do the same thing, bunch it together. Work your fid down into the middle of all those strands. Play with it and you'll be able to tell when you're not fighting against the strands. And you see it's opening up. Sliding on there. You don't want to force it through any threads again. Get down here to the bottom, find an opening. Then you're sliding it through before that fid disappears. Almost too far. I'm going to cut an angle in there again. And again, cutting that angle just helps increase the taper even more. Now that I'm not worried about it pulling apart. Start feeding it down my fid. Again, I want to get as much of that tail fed into there as I can. I guess I didn't do it before. This is a good place to use that pusher. That's going to keep it tight. As you feed your fid back through. There you go. Now it's hidden. It's buried. This tail got buried in that loop. Got a little bit of extra swinging weight on the end. So when you're wrapping these, you're going to find which way wraps around to where you're not quite back to your Versa button yet. And in order to keep this in place, as you saw here, we're going to put on a little bit of bungee cord through the tag end. To do that, I've just used this and my smallest fid. Here's our tag end, and just start working it through. This time it doesn't really matter if you split the threads as much. Give it some good pressure, and that'll open up a pretty good hole there for you. And local hardware store or Amazon or whatever you use. This is probably on Amazon. You can find a link in the description below. Just some run-of-the-mill bungee cord here. See how long that was that it needed to go. So I go about half the distance, so it's going to have to stretch. Cut that off. Feed one end through real easy. And then I tie just an overhand knot here on the end. And to keep this from fraying too much more, where it picks up a bunch of burrs or anything like that, just grab my lighter, burn that down. Again, that's just to keep it from fraying, where it gets full of burrs and junk. And that's that. You can, if you want, pass some, if you had some that was wide enough, you could pass it over and be able to keep this from moving. Another option would just be to come around it like that, which is what I've done on mine, and that's not going to let it move as much. Coming around, pulling your bungee, and there you go. That is our daisy chain, our Amsteel daisy chain mod on the B-stick. Again, this one was fairly short because it's my top stick. It was approximately 7 foot in length doubled over. By the time we were done, we were down to about 6 foot in total length, but that's still going to wrap around a pretty decent sized tree for your top stick. Still probably a bit of overkill. So in order to finish this stick off, you'll see that I'll go through eventually when I'm tinkering, and I'll cut out the holes. Probably again during the off season. Right now there's just not the time for that kind of stuff. I do number my sticks so that I know when I'm taking them apart at the base of the tree which one's going where, for the fact that each one has shortening length of the Amsteel. So you don't want to have your super long one at the top of the tree and your super short one stretching to get the bottom of the tree. But I just throw a little bit of tape over the stealth strip, grab my marker, and like I said, this is stick number 5. And that is going to do it for phase 2. Stay tuned, and I will show you next how we are going to go from where we're at with disc comparison. This stick, and there's our finished product. So stay tuned, guys. See you on part number 3.